There are some people who, even when the world is falling apart, don't raise their voices. They don't argue. They don't panic. They don't rush to prove themselves right. They just breathe. While everyone else is searching for meaning amidst the chaos, they watch silently, as if they've been through this storm before. You probably know someone like that. One of those people who make you feel like there's silence around them. No matter what, they maintain their composure. Balanced, stable, unwavering. But have you ever wondered how some people can remain so calm while others fall apart? The answer is much deeper than you think. True calmness isn't the absence of emotions. It's something that emerges at the point where emotion and understanding meet. These people do not feel. They do feel. They just don't react the way they used to. After seeing enough, after suffering enough, after realizing that panic solves nothing, you stop fighting against uncontrollable storms. You learn to just stand there in the rain. That's the psychology of calm people. They weren't born that way. They became that way. Look, people who are always calm are often people who were never calm at one point. They used to overthink. They used to care too much. They used to try to control everything, fix everything, please everyone. And every time they tried, they learned the same lesson. Life doesn't always turn out the way you want it to. No matter how hard you try. At some point, they stopped trying to control the ocean. Instead, they learn to surf on it. That's what true calmness is. It's not indifference, it's emotional wisdom. Psychologists call it emotional regulation, but that term doesn't quite capture it. It's not just about suppressing emotions or pretending everything is okay. It's about understanding emotions so deeply that you no longer let them control you. Calm people aren't emotionless. They're emotionally fluid. They've learned the language of their own minds. They can feel anger, but without exploding. They can feel sadness, but without drowning. They can be in a state of uncertainty, but without losing their balance. Because there's a little voice whispering inside them, "This too shall pass." And that voice isn't blind optimism. It's memory. They live long enough and learn that even the worst moments fade. That panic doesn't speed up healing. And that peace lies in acceptance, not control. Many people misunderstand calm people. They think calm means cold, but in reality, it often means compassion. Calm people are those who can make room for others when everyone else is panicking. Those who can sincerely say, "It's okay," not because they don't care, but because they know chaos isn't permanent. There's a quiet power in this. This power comes from knowing that not every fight is worth your energy, that not every insult needs a response, that not every storm should be feared. Choosing peace, even when instincts want to fight. But let's delve deeper. Why do some people reach this state while others are constantly overwhelmed? The answer lies in the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear and emotional responses. In people who practice mindfulness or experience intense emotional experiences, the amygdala becomes more balanced. It still signals danger, but it no longer takes over your system. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that thinks logically, intervenes before emotion kicks in. In other words, calm people have trained their minds to pause between feeling and reacting. That pause itself is their superpower. They can hear something hurtful in an argument and not immediately retaliate. They can sit in the uncertainty without needing to fill the silence. They can hear their own voice even when the world is noisy. That pause, that moment of stillness, is where wisdom resides. But here's the interesting thing. Calm people weren't mostly taught this through books or therapy. Most learned it the hard way. From heartbreaks, disappointments, from understanding that reacting quickly usually makes things worse. At some point, they got tired of their own chaos. Tired of overreacting, regretting, apologizing, explaining. They reached a point where peace was more important than being right. Now, when tension rises, they choose silence instead of shouting. breathing instead of blaming, letting go instead of holding grudges, not carrying burning emotions inside. But this calmness isn't always easy, because sometimes calm people carry storms inside that no one can see. They appear peaceful, but this calmness is a hard-won achievement, forged by pain, not perfection. They have secretly cried, questioned their worth, felt invisible and misunderstood. And from all this, they discovered that peace is not the reward of an easy life. It is a discipline they built when they realized that emotional chaos no longer served them. That's why people who are always calm think differently. They don't act on impulse. They proceed with perspective. They don't seek approval. They seek meaning. They don't need to prove they are right. They prefer to understand because they have deeply understood one thing. Reacting to everything makes you a prisoner of everything. The calmer you are, the freer you are. In psychology, this is called response flexibility. Choosing your own reaction, not having the reaction choose you. Calm people have mastered this. They don't suppress emotion, they direct it. They allow the energy to pass through them, but they don't let it destroy them. That's why they're often the ones who appear the most composed in times of crisis. But then they silently collapse, not because they're not faking it, but because they understand timing. There's a time to feel, a time to act, a time to process, a time to let go. Their calmness isn't a mask. It's an inner compass, something that keeps them aligned no matter how fiercely the winds blow. If you look closer, you'll notice something else. Calm people don't just react differently, they see differently. While most people see chaos, they see patterns. While most people see problems, they see lessons. While most people see endings, they see beginnings disguised as change. They've trained their perceptions to broaden their perspective, to look at the big picture instead of getting stuck on the main point. That's what gives them balance. That's why even when they lose something, they can say, maybe it was meant to be. This isn't denial. It's a perspective born from experience. That calm person sitting quietly in the corner probably experienced things that broke them once. They've just learned not to live in that brokenness anymore. When you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you create space. And peace begins in that space. The next time you see someone who isn't shaken at all, think about this. They're not detached from life. They're holding on deeper. They've stopped being tossed about by every wave because they've become the ocean themselves. Their calmness isn't indifference. It's understanding. The understanding that not every emotion needs to be expressed. Not every thought requires attention. Not every situation deserves to be wasted energy, because energy is sacred to them. They use it wisely on things that build, not things that destroy. They've seen how easily chaos can consume a person, how drama can destroy peace, how small reactions can turn into regrets. That's why they choose differently now. When someone belittles them, they pause. When someone misunderstands them, they explain if it's worth it. Otherwise, they walk away. They don't collapse when life gets tough. They lean on faith, time, perspective. And that's what makes calm people attractive. Not that they have all the answers, but that they no longer need answers. They've made peace with uncertainty. In a control-obsessed world. That peace is a strength. Because while most people wage wars in their minds, rethinking, regretting, calm people know that silence can say more than words. Not every emotion needs a witness, and sometimes the greatest power is simply not reacting. But there's another layer to it, something very few people talk about. Calmness is also a kind of self-protection. A defense mechanism, yes, but a gentle one. For many, calmness wasn't something they chose. It was something they had to build to survive. They learned early on that reacting loudly doesn't change the outcome. Staying calm is safer. Protecting your emotions protects you from being misunderstood or hurt. So calmness became their armor, their silence, their shield. But here's the beauty. Even though it started as protection, it transformed into strength. Because over time, that restraint turned into awareness. Emotional distance turned into depth. And that silent strength became the foundation of their peace. That's why calm people are often the most self-aware. They understand their triggers. They recognize their patterns. They don't need constant noise to feel alive. They find comfort in stillness because stillness isn't emptiness. It's clarity. The voice of someone who has stopped running away from themselves. Those who are calm are often the people who make the world feel a little slower, a little safer. They don't walk into a room and demand attention. They don't raise their energy to conform to the noise. Instead, they simply lower the noise by being themselves. You can almost feel it. That quiet confidence that doesn't need proof. There's something appealing about people who remain calm in a world dependent on reaction. Not because they're emotionless, because their emotions have matured. And maturity isn't about age. It's about understanding what truly brings you peace. Calm people generally know that arguing rarely changes someone's mind. Rushing rarely speeds things up. Worrying rarely prevents something from happening. So they let go of what doesn't serve them. Not because they don't care, but because they finally learned the price of caring about everything. That calm person has probably already experienced what you're experiencing in panic. They've already faced heartbreak, loss, rejection, fear. And they've seen that even after seemingly unbearable moments, life goes on. And this realization is their peace. They don't expect life to be easy. They've simply stopped expecting it to be fair. And just this change eliminates half of life's chaos. When something bad happens, most people fall into the why me spiral. But the calm person thinks, why not? Not from defeat, but from understanding that life is for everyone. And from knowing that resisting this truth will only multiply the pain. They discovered a profound truth. Without resistance, pain is just a feeling. But with resistance, pain turns into suffering. So they stopped fighting what happened. They accepted the flow of life, not as passive observers, but as active participants who know when to act and when to wait. Because calmness is not passivity. It is control in its highest form, self-control. They've learned to separate the outside world from their inner world. The world can be loud, unpredictable, sometimes cruel, but their inner space is sacred. They don't let every external event determine their inner state. That's why calm people feel like they're living in a different dimension. Because they really are. They live in the space between stimulus and response. That tiny, invisible pause. The moment they decide whether to energize chaos or peace. That pause is the hallmark of emotional intelligence. Because the truth is, calmness isn't found, it's created. Every calm person you know is building it moment by moment. They built it during long nights when their minds never stopped. There were mornings when they wanted to let go. In conversations where they chose silence instead of reacting. It's not easy, but it's deliberate. They've trained themselves to be unshakable. Not because life stopped testing them, but because they stopped failing those same emotional tests. If you ask a calm person what changed them, they'll probably say, I'm just tired. Of overthinking, of being defensive, of being misunderstood, of energizing everything that doesn't deserve it. That's why they started valuing peace like oxygen. It's strange. The world celebrates noisy success, but rarely honors quiet power. Yet it is the quiet ones who carry the most wisdom. They are the ones who can remain in stillness long enough to truly hear what life is trying to say. They notice more than they speak. They see through the noise because silence sharpens perception. In that silence, they observe without judgment. And this allows them to understand people deeply. Think about it. Calm people are emotional translators. They don't just hear the words, they hear the intention. They don't just see the behavior, they see the wound behind it. They don't just react to the energy. They absorb, they dissolve, they let go. That's why talking to them feels like therapy. You feel seen, not analyzed. Understood, not judged. Because they don't listen to respond, they listen to understand. This kind of listening requires stillness. And stillness requires strength. Because it's hard to stay centered while others are turning. It's hard to stay soft while the world tries to harden you. But calm people do it anyway. Not because it's easy, but because they know it's necessary. They've understood that peace isn't the absence of problems. It's the ability to not lose yourself when faced with problems. And that's what sets them apart. Most people seek peace in perfect conditions. Calm people create peace in imperfect conditions. They don't wait for the storm to pass. They learn to find stillness within. You'll often see them with simple routines, because simplicity anchors the mind. A morning ritual, a quiet walk, a cup of tea, a few minutes of silence before bed. These little habits aren't random. They are anchors. Psychologically, it creates a sense of control and predictability. And calm people maintain this pattern because it grounds them. They know that without small doses of stillness, the mind begins to conjure up stories. The calmer the mind, the clearer those stories become. There's also something paradoxical. Calm people are often the most emotional souls, but they are also the least reactive, because they've learned that expression doesn't always require an explosion. Sometimes, you express emotion by gently holding it, carrying it until it resolves. And that doesn't mean they don't feel intensity. They just express it differently. Their sadness turns into thought, their anger into clarity, their fears into belief. That alchemy, the ability to transform emotion into awareness, is the essence of calmness. It's what separates emotional maturity from emotional chaos. But there's something even deeper. Calmness doesn't just change how you feel. It changes how people treat you. When you stay calm, it becomes harder to manipulate you. You become unpredictable for those who rely on emotional reactions. And this conserves your energy, because the most surprising thing about chaos is someone who doesn't participate in it. It's a silent rebellion. While everyone else rushes to respond, the calm person waits. And in that waiting, they gain the perspective that others miss. They see the reasons, patterns, dynamics that only emerge in stillness. They don't rush to conclusions, because they've learned that the truth always reveals itself. There's no need to force it. That's why calm people rarely regret their decisions. They give life enough time to show what's real. And perhaps that's the deepest part. Calm people don't just manage emotion. They respect time. They understand that time reveals what emotion hides. Patience isn't inaction. It's wisdom disguised as delay. That's why while others are after quick closure, calm people let things breathe. Because they know that rushing to understand something is the quickest way to misunderstand it. If you ask them how they stay so calm, they smile and say something like, "I just stopped fighting everything." But what they really mean is they stopped fighting life. They stopped trying to win every argument, control every outcome, rewrite every past, predict every future. They started to trust themselves enough to allow things to unfold. Trust. That's the secret ingredient in calmness. Not knowing what will happen, believing that you will cope no matter what. And that belief doesn't come from ego. It comes from experience, from surviving enough storms, knowing you'll survive the next one too. That's why calm people often radiate a quiet self-confidence. Not noisy, showy self-confidence, but a self-confidence like gravity. Not in their words, but in their presence. You feel safe around them because their energy tells you, we don't need to rush. We don't need to fight. We can just be. And perhaps that's what the world needs. People who don't add to the noise. People who pause before reacting, breathe before speaking, Listen before judging. Imagine if everyone learned this just for one day. The world would sound so much quieter. And perhaps, just perhaps, that silence heals in ways words could never. But let's be realistic. Staying calm isn't easy. Even the calmest people lose their balance sometimes. They get angry, they collapse, they doubt. But the difference is that they know how to return to calm. They don't get lost in emotion. They observe, they understand, they let it pass. Here's the cycle. Awareness, acceptance, letting go. Because true calmness isn't about never being shaken. It's about always finding your way. Those who are calm know that emotions are waves, not walls. You can't stop them from coming, but you can choose how to surf through them. That's why they ride life's ups and downs with grace, without letting one wave define the entire ocean. They've learned that happiness and pain are temporary guests, both welcomed, both fleeting. And in this acceptance, they find a peace that isn't dependent on what comes next. That's why calm people often feel timeless, as if they've stepped outside the race everyone else is running. In a way, they are. They're no longer chasing peace. They've become peace itself. And perhaps you felt that call too. The silent voice inside you saying, "I just want peace." Perhaps you've reached the point where chaos no longer excites you, where silence feels like safety, where you prefer understanding to arguing. This isn't weakness. This is growth. Because calmness isn't innate. You grow into it. And once you grow, the world changes color. You stop needing noise to feel alive. You start appreciating quiet moments. Kind people, slow days. You begin to measure success not by how much you achieve, but by how peacefully you live. And the best part is, the calmer you are, the clearer you see. People, patterns, purpose. You realize how much of life is noise, pretending to be important. And once you see it, you can't go back to not seeing it. So you start simplifying. You simplify your thoughts, your space, your relationships. You choose less, and somehow it feels like more. Because calm people know that the goal isn't to have a perfect life. It's to have a peaceful mind. And peace doesn't come from fixing everything on the outside. It comes from learning to rest inside, even if nothing makes sense. That's what makes calm people rare. Not a lack of emotion, but their understanding of it. They don't run from the storm. They become the stillness within. They don't control the wind. They learn to move with it. They aren't afraid of uncertainty. They see it as part of the dance. And perhaps that's the message we all need. Calmness isn't found at the end of the journey. It's found when you stop running and decide to be right here, now. Because life will always test you. It will shake you, challenge you, disrupt your rhythm. But each time you have a choice, to react or to return. And each time you choose to return to calmness, you become a little stronger, a little wiser, a little freer. So if anyone ever tells you you're too calm, take it as a compliment. It means you've mastered emotional balance in a world based on reaction. It means you see the storm and don't become the storm. And it means you've found a kind of strength that doesn't scream, just exists. Because calmness isn't emptiness. It's fullness without noise. It's strength without aggression. It's emotion without chaos.